Hi, everyone, and welcome again to another one of my Podbean podcasts and YouTube videos on my channel, GaudiumAtSpez22.com. And thank you for joining us. I have a very special guest today, an old friend, actually, Monsignor Andy Baker, who is a priest of the Diocese of Allentown, Pennsylvania. That's how I originally know him, because DeSales University, where I taught, is in the Diocese of Allentown. And we knew him there when he was rector of the cathedral. Even before then, we knew your mother. And Monsignor Baker is the rector currently at Mount St. Mary's Seminary in Emmitsburg, Maryland, my seminary alma mater. So I am very familiar with the Mount, at least from 40 years ago. And Monsignor Baker also has the distinction of having served in the Curia in the Vatican for how many, for the Congregation for Bishops. I assume it's called the Dicastery for Bishops
It
now.
is. It is now.
And how many years did you work there?
8 years altogether, 2001 to 2009.
And were you there at the same time that Bishop James Connolly was there?
Oh, I certainly was. He taught me everything I know. Well, he likes to say that.
Yes, and he's a Mountie too.
He is.
I just interviewed Bishop Connolly. He's an old seminary chum of mine, and actually there are several guys that I went to the Mount with who are now bishops. Bishop Connolly, Bishop Archbishop Coakley,
Oh, yes, he
uh,
was visiting here.
the recently retired Bishop Jacobs is a Mount St. Mary's graduate. Anybody? Am I forgetting anyone? I can't.
Well, Bishop Byrne, no, was he in your time?
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
That
Yeah.
doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. Anyway, it's just that the Mount is a glorious place, and I'm happy to have you here today. So thank you for being here.
Oh, you're welcome, and thank you for having me. It's fun and honor.
Well, I just got finished interviewing last week, and I'm going to post it in tandem when I post this. Bishop-elect Chilinsky, Keith Chilinsky, Father Chilinsky, who is the rector at St. Charles Seminary in Philadelphia. And so I thought, well, that'll be good. Two rectors of two very successful East Coast seminaries that have been around for a very, very long time and have trained a lot of priests. And I
And St.
wanted
Charles
to.
is my alma mater, too. So,
Oh, that's right. It was. It was. And I also, and I'm going to post this soon, just got done interviewing Monsignor Heinz, who is the academic dean there
right.
at Mount St. Mary. So anyway, let's get right to it. Let's begin with just how is Mount St. Mary Seminary doing? And for those who don't know, Mount St. Mary Seminary sits on a co-ed college campus, Mount St. Mary's University, which is the oldest independent Catholic university in the United States. I believe began what 1808, 1804.
1808. That's correct.
Yes,
Yeah.
I think Georgetown began in 1805, but it's Jesuit, of course, and not independent.
Right.
Uh, but anyway, so and it's in Emmitsburg, Maryland, which for those who don't know, it's about a 20-minute drive south from Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, down Route 15, and a short drive to Washington D.C. So anyway, how is the Mount doing?
No, I think we're doing very, very well. Just pointing out a little bit of that history, Larry. In 1808, actually, Father Dubois founded this place as a petit séminaire, so as a minor seminary. And so it was originally founded not so much as a university, but as a seminary. And then the university kind of grew out of it. And, we're doing well. This past fall, we had 166 seminarians here,
Wow.
which is the largest major seminary, American major seminary in the world, really. I like to say in the universe because we haven't found a seminary on Mars yet. Um, but yeah, I think we're doing very, very well. We're also adapting to some new guidelines from our bishops, which is really an adaptation of the universal guidelines from the Holy See. We started this past year in August a propedeutic stage. Well, now, if you can say that word 10 times fast, you'll get an award, I'm sure, which is an initial stage of formation, which is something new for us. It's housed over at the Daughters of Charity. You might remember their rather
Yeah.
large complex, not too far from here, about 2 miles. So when we started this past year, we have a large number of seminarians. 29 of them were in this propedeutic stage. And I think things are going fairly well. Right now, the men are out on their spring break, so things are a bit quiet around here. But I must say the morale is still very strong. They're getting a great education and formation. We've got a wonderful group and team of priests as formators and lay faculty and staff. Everybody is on board with the mission, which, as you know, is extremely important.
Yeah.
We have this cohesiveness among the formators and faculty staff, as well as the seminarians. I mean, nobody's perfect, and this particular generation has got its challenges. But I say to people, just in a few years, the cavalry is coming. So you just wait a little bit, and you're going to have some great priests out there.
Yeah, fantastic. And how long have you been rector there now? About 10 years, it seems like, right?
Yeah, this is my 9th. I'll be starting my 10th in this coming fall. Yes.
So the reason why I bring that up is that much of that cohesiveness, the curriculum, the faculty you have there is had been under your watch. So kudos to you. You won't pat yourself on the back, but I will give you a nice attaboy for keeping this tradition of the Mount as an excellent seminary going. 166 seminarians. I think when I was there, it was only around 140 or so, but we actually had roommates and things like that.
Yeah, you didn't have the Keating Hall, which is what they built after your time.
Yeah, so that's great. That's fantastic. That it's busting its seams and doing quite well. Now, so the curriculum that you were talking about, the excellent theology. Let's talk about that a little bit. It's one of the things I did not talk about with Bishop-elect Chilinsky very much at all, and I regret that. Because I think that the kind of theology that seminarians are learning today is important. Is there an overarching theological vision to the curriculum that you have, or is it just a case where you hire quality faculty? That's the primary consideration, and then you let them do their whatever kind of theology they want to do. So,
yeah, there is I think, an aim here. I mean, first of all, the seminary is a privileged time of intellectual formation. We have other areas of formation, human and spiritual and pastoral, and we need to sort of keep that certainly in balance. But at the same time, this is a moment in a seminarian's life that he will never have again. As a priest, we certainly want priests, and I continue to try to, have intellectual formation and learn things, but this is a very privileged time. And we believe here at the Mount that we need to have the seminarians be immersed into the mind of the church, which is the mind of Christ. That's got to be the primary element to all intellectual formation, to take on the mind of Christ, which is the mind of Christ, his teaching, the teaching that we have in the Catholic Church. We have here at the Mount, I think, and probably was also present at your time, Larry, too, a very strongly oriented Thomistic foundation, not exclusively, but Thomistic foundation, because that's really what the church recommends. Thomas Aquinas is, the solid foundation for theology. We also, and I think this is probably true of any seminary, but particularly here, because we have men in what we call the discipleship stage studying philosophy, that becomes a real ground for their theological endeavor and their theological training and education. There has to be a cohesiveness between both of those, that philosophy really serves as that basis for theological inquiry.
It's very important. Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. Go ahead.
Yes, no, I think that's extremely important, especially in today's world. I was just going to mention to you, Larry, that during our fall and spring break, the men have just come back from an evangelization mission trip. They were at Virginia Tech University over the last couple of days, working with the college chaplain there and focused missionaries. And they come back and they say, now I know why I studied philosophy first, because the questions that are coming in their conversations with especially students on college campuses really have to do with, what is real? What is the truth? Who is God? Why is there suffering? Basic questions that they really struggle with. And that needs to be, as I said, the foundation for theological endeavor. Then the other aspect of it, which is extremely important, is that they see their intellectual formation as integral to their spiritual formation, that they really do theology on their knees, which is a often cited phrase. I think that's extremely important, and that's integrated into their spiritual lives, and also that they pray their theology and theologize their prayer. Um, so yeah, those are just kind of the base some of the basic characteristics that I envision here at the Mount.
The philosophy that they study at the Mount, is that, do they get that from over at the university or in the seminary itself?
A little bit of both. It's mainly the faculty of philosophy that's at the university. We do have one of our priests that's able to has a degree in philosophy, that's able to teach, but it's mainly of a very good faculty of philosophy at Mount St. Mary's University.
Yeah, very good. And I'm glad to hear about the sort of Thomistic emphasis. I'm not so certain that when I was there in the 1980s that there was a strong Thomistic. I mean, we had Father Zilla,
Oh
and
yes, famous.
uh, and famous, now gone on to his reward. But he was a great teacher, great priest, great role model, and a brilliant Thomist, and we learned from him. But by and large, most of the systematics courses were taught by Monsignor Satterfield, and he was very Runnerian. So,
Oh really?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, he was very, and he was a great teacher, and I learned a lot from him. I don't mean to disparage him at all. I'm just saying I'm glad to see. I think this is true of many seminaries now, that there is a swing away from kind of Runnerianism or more highly speculative theologians of this or that wing of the church, and a grounding more in Augustine, Aquinas, the great thinkers of the church. And so I'm happy to hear that.
Yeah, we still need to keep it certainly open to von Balthasar. I mean, of 20th
Oh yeah,
century, Boyer,
yeah.
et cetera, Congar. But to have that grounding, I think, is very important, and yet still be able to expand.
Well, this is very important. One of the reasons why I grew to love von Balthasar and Ratzinger and de Lubac and Congar and all of these guys is because my undergraduate degree was in philosophy. I went to minor seminary in Kentucky, and it was very Thomistic. Okay, very scholastic, very Thomistic. And I don't look back on that with regret at all. Had I not had that Thomistic grounding, I would not have understood why a Ratzinger, a Balthasar, a Congar, these guys, why what they were doing was so important. And
Yeah,
so, yeah, I think you need to have both those things. Anyway, I don't want to dominate the conversation here. I just want to say this, and I'll toss this out there and see what you'll say about this. I think one of the along the lines of theology, they'll never have this opportunity again to study theology in depth like this unless they go on for further studies, but that won't be most of them. And also a grounding in the church's liturgical life, in a kind of almost quasi monastic setting. All of that's very important. But there are those out there, and I asked this same question to Father Chilinsky, out there who say, "Oh, seminaries are outdated. They've seen their day. It's gone. That whole monastic model for training priests, it doesn't get them ready for life in the parish." And so let's do away. Let's just put guys in houses of formation and have them take classes at universities and live in parishes, all this kind of thing. And I said to Father Chilinsky, and then I'll ask you for your comment. I'm a father. I mean, a biological father, right? And no amount of classes that I took would have prepared me for people could tell me what it's like to have a child, but you don't know until you
no,
have a child. So I think it's a bit of a red herring. This is my opinion, to say seminaries don't prepare men for parish life. Well, yes and no. They
yeah,
do in one sense, and we'll come back to that. But nothing can prepare you for parish life until you're in a parish. You know that.
right,
So
right.
what do you think of that argument? Get rid of the seminaries.
Yeah, yeah. I've been a pastor, and I've for a number of years, as you know, at the Cathedral Parish in Allentown, and I've been an assistant pastor. And coming here, there's not a sense of it being a monastic life at all. I think that's maybe previous years, decades ago, that might have been the case to some extent. But those kinds of people, I'd say, well, come and visit, and you
Yeah.
might see that there's quite a difference here. And I certainly would agree. And I've said this to the seminarians: listen, we can't prepare you for everything whatsoever. This is just the beginning of formation. And that's one of the keys to both the new program of priestly formation, and that now the USCCB has published a document on ongoing formation. This is just initial formation. This is just the beginning. When you get into a parish, it's going to be a different way of life. It will mean an application in a pastoral way of all that you've been learning, and there'll be different things emphasized. Like for now, yes, the intellectual life is very much emphasized here. There is an obtaining of a degree, et cetera, et cetera. There's also pastoral formation as well, but that's going to continue and ought to continue in the parish. There's a lot of on-the-job training that I experienced that you can't just do here in the initial stages of formation. They need a foundation first. It's like building a house. It's like saying, well, we really think it's all about the roof. So why should we build the foundation? Well, no, you got to start with the foundation first before you get the roof on.
Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting. I hope viewers listen to the Father Chilinsky, Bishop-elect Chilinsky interview before this one, because I'm going to keep repeating that's exactly the answer that he gave, which with regard to the idea that seminaries follow this monastic model that's outdated. He goes, monastic? No,
Yeah.
hardly. It's hardly monastic anymore. Maybe what was 50 years ago, but it's hardly that anymore. And of course, the Mount sits on a college campus, so it's hardly monastic. Now, a related issue to me along those lines, and I think this is true, so true, that never again will they have this opportunity. It's not just theological formation, and I already mentioned this, but I want to double down on this a little bit, liturgical formation.
Mm.
That they'll never again have an opportunity, in a sense, to really, unless they're in a very special parish, to experience liturgies of that kind of beauty and intensity that they do in the seminary. What kind of emphasis do you think seminaries in general, and in the Mount in particular, what kind of emphasis are they placing on liturgical formation of seminarians? Is there a particular direction that it's going in? Are a lot of the seminarians drawn towards more traditional expressions in the Mass? What do you do with it? That kind of thing.
Right. Well, going back to the intellectual formation, in the mind of the church, it's also celebrating the Mass and the sacraments with and in the mind of the church. And I always say to the men, celebrate the Mass as a priest as the church wishes it to be celebrated. And if you do that, you really know what that is and do that well, it's beautiful. It's stunningly beautiful. And that here at the Mount, I think we do very well. It's formative in the sense that it helps kind of form his liturgical life, his prayer life, but it also gives him a model by which he can begin to think about, as a priest, how should I celebrate the Mass and the sacraments? And so I really do think that it's addressing a need that the seminarians have. They do tend to be more traditional in their devotional life and liturgical life. I think they're really looking for the beauty of the liturgical life. They don't always get that, Larry, as you well know. I mean, sometimes growing up in their parishes, some are converts as well, so they haven't had that, and so they're really longing for it. But what I try to do is to say, all right, no, but always in the mind of the church, always with the church, not trying to go back, go forward. If you really take a look at what the church offers us, it is incredibly beautiful. And it is attractive for other people too, if you do that well and do it right.
Yeah, I think that's important because there's a lot of rhetoric on the internet these days from radical traditionalists, that the bogus ordo and phrases like that,
Right.
only the traditional Latin Mass is reverent enough and beautiful enough.
Proven
And
valid. Yeah.
yeah, and and some people saying, "Oh, the Novus Ordo is an invalid liturgy."
Yeah.
Most of them don't go that far, but there is that fringe element, and I don't know. I mean, I've always been worried that maybe a lot of young seminarians who are on the internet are tempted by such messages. So I do think it's important that the Mount.
And I think you're right. There's a temptation out there. It's easy for them to read the headlines, to get in, go down the YouTube rabbit hole. With certain people and certain YouTube channels that kind of lead them into the wrong place. But again, being a man of the church and according to the mind of the church, there is so much there. And so what we try to offer is the best of the best, the best music, the best vestments, the best liturgical if you don't mind me saying
Yeah.
so, experience for them to be immersed in it and then hopefully to imitate it. But we have to sometimes correct them too, because yeah, there's a few that want to go in a different direction. Um,
Yeah. Yeah. And they're also young. I
yes,
mean,
right,
I remember when I was a young seminarian, I was a fire-breathing little Torquemada mini-me, you know, hunting out heresy. Then I matured and like, okay, uh,
yeah,
just calm down, chap. So the
right,
church is not burning down. Uh,
yeah,
and so, but so they have that liturgical model, and then they go out in the parish, and then they have to confront the reality of parish life, which often does not meet their expectation. I know a priest who this is many years ago now. He got it. He's freshly ordained, got out to this parish, and he had all these grand ideas about liturgy and music and starting a choir. But there was a woman who was the music director, and she was the cantor and the organist and all that kind of stuff. And she had been there for 40 years. She was an institution. And she crooned away up in the choir loft in a register that nobody could follow and so forth.
yeah, yeah.
But his hands were kind of tied, all right, because people loved her, right, and they were willing to have lousy music at mass
Mhm.
just so that they could make her happy or whatever. What do you do, as a young priest when you enter into a situation like that? have
Yeah.
you ever have you ever had to deal with something like that?
To some extent, yes, I have. And I know that it is a reality in today's kind of world and church. I think you're really highlighting the importance of what we call human formation, right? So it's
Yes.
trying to apply in the pastoral realm something that he has learned in the liturgical and maybe more intellectual, and doing it in such a way that he doesn't end up burning the house down or literally his parish down because he takes the steps. So yeah, one step at a time. And it can be done, but it might take some time. We
Yes.
have to also weigh well one's preferences as opposed to one's principles. So sometimes there are certain preferences, like in the realm of music, that you might want to put either on hold, wait, get better training, help the people to understand, and take the time. And it's also, you may not ever get to the point before you're transferred of having it just the way you like it. But that some of that might be more preferential, what I'd really prefer, than necessarily what's absolutely necessary. Those things that are absolutely necessary, you need to work on first when it comes to the
Yeah.
liturgy. And then preferences, slowly, surely, with kindness, with education. And I think that's the key, honestly, Larry. Just as these men have been formed, so those that are involved in various, choirs, ministries, working in the liturgy in the parish, also need that formation. That might take some time. They may not
Yeah.
have either had the formation or have been a little bit deformed in some way with regard to the liturgy. So it takes time, it takes formation, and the priest needs to be able to give that formation.
Yeah. I told Bishop Conley in my interview with him last week, I on December 8th, I attended my local parish here, territorial parish, and Feast of the Immaculate Conception, and they were singing Gentle Woman, one of my least favorite Marian hymns, if you can even call it a hymn, of all time, And
Yeah,
my parents' parish in Lincoln, Nebraska, Bishop Conley's diocese, they still sing all the St. Louis Jesuit songs. So yeah, it takes time.
yeah,
All right. It does. It takes time. Now, with regard to the we discussed the sort of human factor, the liturgical factor, how important those things are. I want to come back to the theological training. Uh, One of the things that I think that the laity, I'll speak for the laity here. I will presume to speak for all of the laity. One of the things I think that we want is better homilies,
mm,
better homiletics from priests. And the old Latin phrase, nemo dat quod non habet. You cannot give what you do not have or do not possess. And if you don't have anything to say, then you're not going to have anything to say. And you're going to end up with homilies, that are kind of superficial, and you wing it, and it's just not really of any depth or anything. And so this is why I think it's really important for seminaries to train seminarians theologically with an eye towards their catechetics and their preaching. Um, I'm assuming you do that, right?
Yes, yes, we do. I mean, just even in some of the scripture courses, that their exegesis are actually on passages that they will someday preach on.
Good.
But also we try to, and I absolutely agree with you, Larry. I think that that's critically important, especially for people of today. They're one, if you will, contact with understanding the Word of God in their lives, and a teaching moment is that 8 to 10 minutes at most of a homily on a Sunday. That may be the only time the average parishioner even hears from their priest, right?
Yeah.
So we really try to work hard with the men to be very, very well prepared. We're a little strict on it. Write it out. We're going to go through it with you. We're going to then have you give it. We'll give you feedback. And I think that we try to be as again, maybe strict is not the best word, but really intense on making sure that they know what they're saying, they're well prepared when they say it, and they get feedback while still here in the seminary. Because, out in the parish, people can be very nice. It may be an absolute terrible homily, but they won't tell you that.
Right.
Here's the time in which you got to say, well, you could have said this a little bit better, or this could have been done, in a different way, or here's a suggestion for the next time. I find the seminarians to be very open to those kinds of suggestions, including from their own classmates. So they get into when they start critiquing, they critique their own classmates, and they know they're going to be critiqued. When they're preparing their homilies, they're, in a good sense, in the kind of mode of critiquing themselves. I always tell them, the best thing to do as a preacher, the best thing is not your mouth, but your ears, to listen to yourself,
Yeah.
to listen as other people would be listening to you. And that can help you be a good preacher.
Seems to me, too, the art of being a good homilist, I mean, I was a teacher for many years, is pretty similar to being the art of being a good teacher, a
Yeah.
theology teacher. And the art involves, number one, you have to have prudence. You have to make prudential judgments about what's appropriate to say, what's not appropriate to say. And yet at the same time, you want to be bold and provocative. Okay. And that's not an easy thing to pull off, being as bold and as provocative as the gospel is, while not being offensive or imprudent. So you as a priest, how have you negotiated that? And I'm
Oh,
assuming go ahead.
it's a fine line. It really is. And, you're never going to please everybody. We've got a congregation out there that are coming from, different ages, different perspectives. They've got all sorts of things going on in their lives. So I always think that it's good to, at the beginning, get to know your people well so that you know how to apply the word of God to their lives, to be challenging, and to make sure that you're helping them grow in discipleship. That's not always easy. It might make some people feel uncomfortable. I think that sometimes too, one of the best ways to approach a difficult topic is also to provide examples and stories so that people can at least see that this is possible to, this aspect of the gospel is possible to apply to my life, maybe through the life of a saint or an example that you have. Those kinds of things, especially people of today, I find to be very important. The other thing is, as Pope St. Paul VI said in Evangelium Nunciandi, the people of today, they appreciate probably more witnesses than they do necessarily the preached word, but we need to have both.
Yeah.
And so by having an integral life myself as a priest and living a true priestly life, it does help people accept the message of the gospel, even when it might be difficult. And so having that integral, if you will, sincere, good priestly life, an example for them and witness of life, helps them swallow sometimes a little more difficult pill when it comes
Yeah.
challenging aspects of the gospel.
It's interesting. And to stay on this theme of homiletics, because I think it's so very important, uh, I sometimes wonder, Monsignor, if homilies today should not presume, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, because I really don't know, but homilies today should presume a more evangelizing posture almost than a catechizing posture, that there has to be more a recognition that the soil that you are tossing seeds into is often quite rocky. And so just quoting catechisms and papal documents and things like that isn't necessarily going to bear fruit, that you almost have to engage in a kind of preambula fide. And once again, here's where philosophy comes in, where you have to realize you're re-evangelizing the baptized in some way. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I do, Larry. There's a church near the Mount where you're leaving their parking lot, and there's a sign as you're leaving the parking lot of the church that says you're now entering mission territory. I think that's very true. Christendom is over. I mean, the Christendom, not the college. I mean, Christendom, as in,
yeah,
the sort of the Christian culture and support. It's not there anymore. It's gone. It's not even partly there. It's gone. And we have to, in our preaching, not understand that, but also preach to that fact. So, yeah, I think it does need to be more, in the best sense of the term, evangelical, and emphasizing the basis of the faith and just the kerygma itself. I've been I've been reading a couple of books about this, some coming out of the University of St. Mary, and also another book that talks about the importance of putting the kerygma back into our teaching and preaching. It's something that people haven't even heard. They might have bits and pieces of catechesis and probably not very good. But just to tell them, Christ died to save us from sin and death, well, that might be a new concept.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that needs to be emphasized.
And even if they've heard it, maybe they don't have the faintest idea what it really means. It's kind of formulaic and doesn't sink in. By the way, yeah, the University of Mary, there's that book From Christendom to Apostolic Mission, I think it's the first one, and the new one is The Religion of the Day. They're both, I've mentioned this in numerous podcasts now. They're both short books, they're not expensive, and boy, do they get to the nub of the issue. If you ask me, I think they're very, very, very good little books.
All right, I'm reading that Religion of the Day. I think it's very good. I'm just in the midst of it now.
Yeah, it's just they just cut right to the chase, don't they? They just get right to it. Or
they do.
Yeah. And I regret, I was supposed to give a talk at the University of Mary last year, but had to, I can't remember the reason why. There was a conflict. I had to back out. But anyway, so my apologies to University of Mary. At any rate, what problem? Let's shift gears a little bit. What problems are on the horizon? I was in seminary in the 1980s. There was no internet. There were no cell phones. There was no internet pornography. Any of that kind of stuff. Now you really are in a digital age, a different era. Does that present formators at a seminary with a unique set of problems?
It certainly does, yes. And it was not something that I grew up with as well, but these men have grown up in literally a digital age. They don't know anything else but having a screen in front of them. Even as kids, you see these parents that give, the 2-year-old the iPad just to keep them busy, so they've had screens for a very long time. You might remember, Larry, I was in 1997, I was chaplain of Lehigh University, Catholic chaplain of Lehigh University. And I bought a sweatshirt. And just at the Super Bowl party that we had here with the seminarians, I was wearing the sweatshirt. And the seminarian said, "Oh, that's probably a pretty old sweatshirt." I said, "It goes back to 1997. He said, "That sweatshirt's older than I am, Monsignor." So these men have grown up literally in that digital age that presents real problems with attention, first of all, just being able to work hard for an extended period of time. It unfortunately opens up a temptation for pornography, internet pornography, that's literally in your pocket, with your smartphone. And because they're so used to the screen, that's it's kind of addictive. It really is addictive when you use it too much, and that causes all sorts of problems in their just in their social ability to interact with others. Their, I guess I said, their concentration, their ability to work hard for a longer period of time away from the screen. So this affects them humanly speaking, spiritually speaking. Like, how do you spend a holy hour without a screen? And intellectually, and then pastorally, just as I said, they have sometimes difficulties interacting well with other people because they're so used to being friended on Facebook, but that's not real friendship. How do you develop a true relationship with other people, particularly in a parish setting? So it does present a lot of challenges, that in particular.
Yeah, yeah, and I certainly, I'm glad I'm not in your shoes, Monsignor, because I think that is an enormous. I just know. Let's just take pornography. I mean, I just know from when I was a professor at DeSales University, I always made a point in all of my classes to spend about 20 to 25 minutes at some point in the semester to address the issue of pornography. And it was amazing to me. And I would say to my students, after class, I have office hour, and you're free to come to my office to discuss this if you want. Door open. There won't be
Oh,
a, yeah,
you flood doors open. Yeah.
yeah, uh, and so the amazing thing was the number of young men that came into my office said, Dr. Chap, I have a huge problem and I don't know what to do about it.
Mm.
And the number of young women that came into my office, Dr. Chap, my boyfriend has a huge problem and he
Yes.
doesn't know what to do with it.
Wow.
And I'm assuming that the problem has only gotten exponentially worse. And so I'm sure that as a seminary rector, there's no way you could possibly set up as a rule no young man who has ever been a habitual viewer of pornography is going to be allowed into the seminary. Because if you were to make that rule, you would probably have to eliminate
Eliminate
about
a good
90%.
number of men. Unfortunately, when they first come in, yes, yeah. Addiction is another level. That's something else that
Yeah.
we would not allow. But yeah, the
Yeah.
habitual aspect. That's why we've incorporated into our propedeutic stage, this initial stage of formation, a technology detox. So they've got to plug them in and put all of their electronic equipment in one room, and they only have limited access to it. And I'll tell you, I had one of the priests who had gone over to our propedeutic stage seminarians to give them a conference, and he said, "It's amazing." He said, "They're all looking at you. They're all paying attention. They all seem to be involved in class because they don't have any computers in front of them. They don't have any electronics in
Yeah.
front of them. They actually have to take notes on a piece of paper." But that's and they reacted very well. The seminarians are reacting well to it.
Yeah. No, I think that's great. By the way, I on my end at least, your video has frozen, but at least your voice can still be heard, so that's good.
Well,
There's probably nothing you. It's
I think
probably
we're
just
frozen.
yeah. Can you hear me? Uh-oh. Can you hear me, Monsignor? Oops. Well, we've lost Monsignor Baker. Maybe he'll come back in a second. In the meantime, I'm just going to complete my thought, which we were discussing, internet pornography, the digital age, seminary. There he's coming back. And so my apologies to my listeners, but I think Monsignor Baker is on his way back. So just hang on a second, everyone. I'm not really good at editing these things. So I tend not to
Can
edit
you
these
hear me,
things.
Larry?
I can hear you very loud and clear. We've lost your video, but at least the audio is there. Uh-oh. So he's backed out again. But anyway, I think the issue of internet pornography is a huge one for this generation of young men in particular. And it's something that seminaries, I really do believe, have to address. And well, here we go. Here we go. Let's see. Let's see what we got here now. Anyway, I to
Can
my
you hear me,
view,
Larry? No,
I can't. I can hear you. I can hear you.
I
Yes,
can't seem to
yes.
get something happened and my video went.
Well, that's okay. Let's just do the audio. We're fine. Can you still hear me? Let's just
Yes,
proceed
I
with the
definitely
audio.
can.
I think the vast majority of people that tune into these episodes of mine do so simply on the podcast audio version anyway. So anyway, I was going to suggest. Are you familiar? Are you are you there?
Yes, yes.
Okay, okay. I was going to suggest viewers pick up and read. Are you familiar with the writings of Bishop Eric Varden, who's the Bishop of Trondheim, Norway, at all? He's written a great little book on chastity that I think is just fantastic.
No, I've never heard of it. I've heard of him, but I didn't know he wrote a book on chastity.
Yeah, it's excellent, and I highly recommend it to anybody, not just for seminarians or priests or whatever. I think anybody. It's a brilliant little book on the virtue of chastity. But anyway, let's move on to something else, which is near and dear to my heart, which is we've talked about the liturgical formation, the theological formation, and we touched on the human formation, and that's of course important. But what does that mean in a sense? And what I'd like to focus on are the apostolates, what we called in my day field education, where you would go out, and I worked with the migrant workers in apple orchards and the prison and stuff like that. What sort of apostolates does the Mount have its seminarians do these days? Oh, I think we've lost Monsignor Baker entirely. All right. Well, we may have to cut this short, everyone, and we might have to do a part two of this Podbean podcast and YouTube video, so we can complete the conversation with Monsignor Baker, because I really would like to know what the apostolates are. Because I think this is a very important aspect of seminary formation. I really do. Uh, One of the most neglected things in modern, I think, in the modern church is this bifurcation between those Catholics who are concerned with social justice and those Catholics who seem more concerned with, for want of a better term, with sexual issues, sexual morality, and that kind of thing. Are you back, Monsignor? No, he's not. We're having definite troubles there. So anyway, I think this is very, very important. The social justice aspect of seminary formation. I spent, when I was a seminarian at Mount St. Mary's, I took some time off, and I lived in the Dominican Republic for quite a while, and not just to learn Spanish, but also in order to better understand cultures from the Caribbean, Hispanic cultures in general, and so on. And it really changed my life. It utterly changed the direction of my thinking as a seminarian. And my own thinking is that all seminarians should be, in some sense, required to do some kind of missional work like that. And they probably are. I'm probably just ignorant of the fact that they're not. Because I think in this day and age, it's very, very, very important for priests to be engaged in the burning social justice issues of our time. And I think a priest that is not connected. Okay. Okay. Again, I think
I'm kind of on my phone.
Oh, okay. Well, there you go. I can hear you. Uh, can you hear me now? No, we lost him again. So I think I'm just going to end this, and we'll try to pick this up. Oh, there he is.
All right.
He's
Can you hear me
back.
now?
Oh, I can hear you now. Okay, so we've had a little 10-minute glitch. I hope we didn't lose a bunch. I've said before, while you were gone, I'm terrible at editing these things. I've tried to edit them before and just butchered them, even lost a couple. So people can just be patient. Anyway,
I'm
one
on
of the
my
things.
phone. So that
Okay.
helps.
Well, we don't have to stay on here very much longer, but I did want to pick your brain just a little bit more. I was talking while you were gone with my audience about you mentioned human formation. And I know the Mount, I mean, back in my day, they were called field education apostolates. I don't know what you call them today. Uh, how extensive is that? Because I think when I look back on my seminary formation, I realize now that was one of the most important things that I did as a seminarian, were those field education apostolates. So what is the Mount doing in that regard?
Yeah, so we have many different placements. We call it pastoral formation experience sites where they go to, and it is primarily for their pastoral formation. And so we try to give them a variety of experiences during their time here at the Mount. So some of them, at the beginning, they might go to a school, then to an institution like a prison or a hospital, then a parish. Certainly, as deacons, they are there in a parish for much of the weekend, and we do it by hours, so it's not a particular day. Like at St. Charles, I think they have still a particular day that they go out. We have men going out on different days, and we just track the number of hours that they're going. And they visit and they get feedback from their supervisors. We set goals in their pastoral formation so that they can try to work on particular areas that maybe they don't have some strengths in. And this is, I think it's very important because it really sets the tone for what they're here for, which is ultimately to be pastors. And that pastoral experience is important to have, and being mentored by their parish priest. I think that's probably one of the things we're emphasizing more, is that the pastoral supervisor, as we used to call them, needs to be more of a mentor. So that if he's teaching in the school, or if he's working in the parish, if he's going to the hospital or working in prisons, working in the soup kitchen, that he has someone there that can be with him, that can make suggestions on how to improve, that can give feedback to the seminarian and to us as a seminary, just I think ultimately to help them gain a pastoral heart, the Christ heart. And so it's not just pastoral formation too; it's also very much human formation, and learning how to be that pastor according to the mind and heart of Christ.
And is there any emphasis placed on, in particular, ministry to Spanish-speaking Catholics?
Yes, especially those that have some capability. We have a number of sites that demand, either parishes that are primarily Hispanic, working with Catholic charities, and even doing interviews with people that are coming searching for services in Spanish. We really want most, if not all, of our men, once they're ordained priests, to at least be able to celebrate the sacraments and have a basic conversation in Spanish. So we have a Spanish Mass here, a completely Spanish Mass, including the deacon giving a homily in Spanish on Thursdays every week here at the seminary. And there are these, as I said, these particular sites where men that have some capability and maybe even a little bit more advanced might be able to do some advanced work on the pastoral site in Spanish.
Well, I think that's excellent. I mean, as you know, I run a Catholic worker farm, and the Catholic worker movement is near and dear to my heart. And one of the messages of Pope Francis that I do particularly like, is that he wants a church that smells like the sheep, a church of the poor. I mean, look at the name that he chose, Francis,
Right.
The saint of poverty, the saint of the poor. Um, to what extent do you think, I'm not going to put you on the spot, say what's the Mount doing about this,
Right.
to what extent though, and looking towards the future, seminaries in general, not just the Mount, how prophetic do you think priests are going to have to be? In other words, priests, in my opinion, are going to have to also be social critics, in the vein of the Old Testament prophets, in a sense, to use a cliche, to be able to speak truth to power, to be able to give voice to the voiceless, to be on the side of the disenfranchised members of our society. Given the fact that probably a lot of seminarians come from fairly middle class backgrounds, and
Right.
don't have necessarily a great experience of that kind of being disenfranchised. Do you see that as something that seminaries should be focusing on in the future?
Oh, most definitely. And I think peripheries, that physically, if you will, and existential peripheries. One of the things that we've incorporated into our propedeutic stage, again, that initial stage of formation, is that any kind of pastoral work is not done in a parochial setting, but among the poor, among the sick. And they do work that's hard work, including on a farm, I might say, Larry. They work on in a local farm. but they also we want them to be working with those on the peripheries, those that are voiceless, those that need assistance, immediate, sometimes material assistance, but also more existential too. They need to be teaching people the faith, starting with the kerygma. That's also a periphery that I think that priests today need to be better adept at doing. And going back to a point that we talked about a little bit earlier, Christendom is gone. So this prophetic voice has got to be ever clearer in an increasingly secular world that's taking advantage, unfortunately, of people on the peripheries. They just become statistics, or they're there just simply to serve those in power. We go to the abortion issue too, the unborn, and we know the struggle that's present there. All of that is just what Pope Francis has called, the throwaway society. And what's being thrown away? Who's being thrown away? It's those that don't have a voice. It's those that don't have the power in the halls of justice or legislature.
Yeah, the unborn, the young people that are being trafficked, the elderly, the drug addicted on our streets. This is all part of our throwaway culture. I do want to, as we wrap this up, and with what, in one sense, is a. I don't know if there's any way a seminary can prepare a guy for this, because it goes back to what we said earlier. There's no preparing, but we do live in an era of downsizing in the church in some sense. Parishes being closed left and right, parishes being consolidated. I think it's probably more common in many, many, many dioceses than not for a priest 2 years out of ordination to suddenly be pastor or pastoral administrator of 2, sometimes 3 parishes. So, it's all well and good to say a priest should do this, a priest should do that, and we're preparing for the. What if they're just too busy? I mean, how do you prepare a young man? Because there's such a thing these days, and I know from talking to a lot of priests, and I'm sure even better than I do, this thing called priest burnout. Yeah. How do you prepare guys for the jolt to the system that they're going to face as they get out there in the world? I'm just trying to organize a conversation with the Holy Cross priest out in Colorado right now. We can't find 2 minutes to talk because he's so busy. That's a problem.
Yeah. And I really think of this in really a couple of different ways. First of all, a priest needs to be a man of prayer. And that might sound like too pietistic, but if his life is not rooted in a real relationship with Jesus Christ and a constant conversation and really reception of grace and mercy, he's going to burn out pretty darn quickly, because then it just becomes a profession. He becomes an activist, and he'll burn out really quickly. So he needs to have that grounding, and the holy hour is the way we put it here at the Mount. A time in front of the Blessed Sacrament, real rigorous and deep prayer life. But also to handle those kinds of situations, he needs to also develop the ability to have good fraternity with his brother priests, and looking for ways to do that, because it's easy here in the seminary. I mean, his brothers are, right down the hall. But he's not going to have that as a priest. And as you said, especially early on, he's going to be given, his first parish is probably going to be fairly small, out in the middle of nowhere, and he'll be by himself. So he needs to have that connection. Then finally, it's really applying the Second Vatican Council when it comes to the laity. The Consecratio Mundi is that the laity need to also be called forth and given the ability to also engage in the proclamation of the gospel in the ways that are appropriate for lay people. As though, the priest has got to do everything. No, he doesn't, nor should he, nor is he best at doing everything. There are a lot of people that are extremely competent lay people that should be doing things that, unfortunately, the priests think, oh, I have to do. And then they just keep piling up things on themselves and on their schedule, and not really allow lay men and women who are, again, probably better at what's supposed to be done than the priest.
Yeah, absolutely. I know a lot of priests who say that exact same thing. Successful priests, like you know Father Hoffa from the Allentown
Yes, I do.
diocese. Yeah,
Sure.
I said I call him Alan because I knew him from before he was even a priest. I said, Alan, how do you? He's so busy,
Yeah.
and he's doing. Bishop Schlert's got him doing everything, and because he's so competent, he's so good at what he does. And he says, I
Mm.
pray.
Right.
Okay,
Right.
I make prayer a priority and a little bit of spiritual reading a priority. If I don't have that, then I burn out, And Father
Right.
Miller, same thing. I know Father Miller, he's in that same boat. So I think that's very true. One last thing, and this is going to be seeming like out of left field, but I'm going to throw it out there anyway. It might be a generational thing. And so I'm curious what young seminarians are like today in terms of as they look forward to their priesthood, what they're looking forward to most about being a priest. But there's a certain, and I think you've experienced this, there's a certain element, a certain generation of priests that don't like hearing confessions. And they
Mm.
sort of let you know that they don't like hearing confessions. There's no regularly scheduled confession in the parish. You have to do it by appointment. Or if there is a regularly scheduled confession, they're always late to it, sometimes don't even show up. And maybe for good reasons, they got called away or whatever. And you go into the confessional and it's you're in, you're out, and it's very clear that they just, yeah, yeah. Uh,
Right.
is that a generational thing? And I'm not saying that's all priests of that generation, but I think it was a phenomenon. Do you see that among young priests, young graduates of the Mount who are now priests, that they have a greater love for hearing confessions? Because I think this is really important as well. A
Yeah.
love for hearing confessions.
Yeah, we are in a time of mercy, and the sacrament of mercy needs to be better, more available to people. And I see in these young seminarians a desire for that. I think it was maybe a little blip on the screen. It was a phenomenon for maybe a particular generation. But I do the penance practicum with the seminarians, all of them, all the deacons. And I make sure that I'm the penitent for every one of them. We have, a whole practicum in which we take them. I have a particular sins that I confess and see how they do it, and then we go through it. And I find that they are eager to do it. It's a little frightening at first, obviously, and there's nothing you can do to ultimately prepare for everything. But I do find them because simply, Larry, it's the fact that confession has been important to them. You know,
Yes.
they came sometimes to the church or had their reversion by way of a priest who was available in confession, compassionate in confession, and regularly saw them for confession. And because of that, I think these seminarians in this generation sees the need for it, and they want to be that priest for somebody else. So I find it just the opposite. I think they're very eager to make
Good.
the sacrament available.
Excellent. Because, half an hour on a Saturday afternoon sometimes is the most inconvenient time for lay people that have families to go to confession. So I often think, and I've had priests criticize this opinion of mine, but I know, like at the cathedral in Allentown, when you were there, I'm a big believer in having confessions scheduled before like daily masses or even sometimes
Mm-hmm.
before Sunday mass. And because if you build it, they will come. If you make it
Yes.
available, it's amazing how many. So, but I've had priests say to me, "Oh, no, 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 no. You don't want to do that because then all you get are the scrupulosity types who are in there every single day, confessing that, and I'm thinking, well, then, deal with that. What do you think?
Yeah.
I think
Well,
that,
that wasn't my experience at the cathedral, honestly. I mean, Larry, I was their pastor for 6 years, and we had confessions before our two daily masses, before the 6:30 mass and before the 8, plus on Saturdays, plus an Advent and Lent. I started having confessions available before every Sunday mass. And I'll tell you, in my 6 years there as pastor, there may have been a handful of times, literally 4 or 5 times in all of those years in which no one came before daily mass confessions. There was always somebody. And yeah, sometimes you do get some of the scrupulous, but honestly, it's people that have what I would call devotion to the
yes,
sacrament. Not the scrupulous people. Sometimes, again, you do meet and you got, like you said, you got to deal with that. That's just life. The other thing that I discovered was when we started adding confessions on before Sunday Mass and Advent and in Lent, I thought, well, maybe we'll somehow take away from those people or the numbers that are coming before daily Mass. That wasn't the case at all. We got more people because it was more convenient. It was more available. It was more emphasized. And then you start to preach it. And then, if you build it, they will come. Yes, if you preach it, they will come. And they do.
Preach it. Like in our parish, I go to the an Anglican ordinariate parish, believe it or not. Father Eric Bergman, our pastor, he has confessions before Mass on Sunday. And it has now gotten to the point where he has to cut them off and go say Mass and then announce, I'll be back in the confessional after Mass for anybody that I didn't have time for at the beginning. That's how successful that has been.
Yes, yes. Yeah, no, that was my experience as well. I mean, at times I've had to say to a penitent, could you tell the next person in line that unfortunately they'll be the last person, and then after Mass I'll be available if anybody else is still in line.
So that's just, but to go back to my original question, that is great news that this generation of seminarians is and I is open to, is much more looking forward to confession. And I agree with you. It probably has a lot to do with the fact that for many of them, confession was important in their lives.
Yes.
Very, very important in their lives. Well, anyway, I mean, I kind of have covered all the bases that I wanted to cover. Do you have any last points that you would like to make?
Well, just simply that seminary formation is critically important to the life of the church. It's not certainly the only thing, but critically important. And just have your listeners just to know that please pray for us, pray for the formators, pray for the seminarians, and above all, to pray for their perseverance. That's been my prayer all throughout my time as rector here, that they will really persevere, not only as, to finally be ordained priests, but persevere as priests.
Yeah, absolutely. Here I am. I was 7 years in seminary. I didn't persevere. I got married instead. But that's okay. But that is fantastic. Yes. I'm glad you ended that way. That we need to pray for our seminarians and their perseverance, and we need to pray for vocations.
Yes,
absolutely. I mean, it seems like they go up, they go down, they go up, they go down, and so that's probably just the cultural situation that we're in.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Monsignor, for taking time. My apologies to the listeners and viewers. We had it wasn't that long. It seemed like forever when you're sitting here trying to negotiate.
Yeah, no, I apologize. There must be something with our Zoom. I don't know where our connection is. So
do you have the paid version of Zoom or the free version of Zoom? Because
I've got the paid through the university. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, then it shouldn't have cut you off at 40 minutes.
Exactly.
Yeah, because that's what I thought for a second, because I have the paid version and I'm the host of this, so it wouldn't have cut it off anyway. But anyway, thank you, Monsignor. It's always great to see you. Maybe our paths will cross again soon.
Yes, thank you, and my best to Carrie as well. And I'm reading your book right before I go to sleep. So thanks for putting me to sleep all these.
Yeah, you can line your dog crate with it too. There we go. All right. Thanks a lot, Monsignor.
Larry, God bless you.
And thanks everyone for listening.
Okay.
Oh, hang on. No, I don't want to end the meeting. I want to just stop the recording.